Let me first of all express my deep gratitude to the Hong Kong Trade Development Council for giving me this honor and privilege to speak at this annual event of the Federation of Hong Kong Business Associations worldwide. As I told George as I came in, I feel a duty to come here because I'm a beneficiary of your great work done for Hong Kong. I headed the Hong Kong's Economic and Trade Office in London for around 18 months between 2005 and 2006. So I can speak personally how important a role that our business associations are playing worldwide for promoting Hong Kong, both in terms of trade, our economic development, as well as Hong Kong as a distinct world city. This morning I've chosen to speak on what I feel now in my current capacity as a Secretary for Development that makes Hong Kong great, the new dimensions of Hong Kong's infrastructure development. But before I do that, very coincidentally, I somehow noticed that there's a lot of things in this year's annual event, which is of course the 10th Hong Kong Forum, that has a lot of relationship with the things that I'm doing in Development Bureau. I looked through the program and realized that apart, of course, from my own participation to talk about Hong Kong's infrastructure, that amongst the optional visits which delegates will do, you have an architecture walk, which Joyce just told me will be covering important historic buildings in Central. So I have brought you this pamphlet, Conserving Central, which should be out there in the counter for you to pick up. This is the latest initiative of the Chief Executive to adopt a holistic manner in revitalizing and conserving very important historic landmarks in the Central District, all the way from the Victoria Harbour front to the central government offices which we are now working. And then you also have the farewell dinner, which is going to take place in one of my historic buildings, a declared monument in Western Market, which we have revitalized and put in restaurants and little shops several years ago. But just in case you still have time for another optional visit, I would highly recommend this one, the Tai Tam Waterworks Heritage Trail. These are 41 historic buildings in 6 clusters of Hong Kong's reservoirs built over a century ago, which have recently been declared as Hong Kong's monuments. So you have within it a map with all the bus stations and routing on how to do it. You could do a long walk of 3 hours. You could do a short walk from Park View of about 45 minutes. So this is another thing that you could pick up at the counter out there. So I hope that you all have a wonderful stay in Hong Kong. And I hope this is a little recognition from the Hong Kong HKSAR Government of the wonderful work you have done. Now, coming back to real business, when I was first invited to speak, I think TDC wanted me to speak on very serious stuff, integration with mainland and hard infrastructure. I said I will cover it, but that's not going to be the main focus of my theme. Because having done this job for 2.5 years, which is right in the middle of my 5-year term, I realized that a great city is not just defined by economic progress and major infrastructure, glamorous roads and bridges. A great city is also defined by its history, by culture, by being green and by being spacious, so that local people and visitors could also have a good quality environment and for enjoyment. But let's start with some very basic facts about our land use and our planning. You all know Hong Kong is a modern city of 7 million people. We are predominantly service economy. Over 90% of our gross domestic product is accounted for by services. And as a result, TDC has also transformed itself to promoting trade in goods to trade in services. We are very high density development. This 6,460 persons per square kilometers is average. But if you look at some of the high density areas like Kwun Tong on the eastern part of Kowloon, the per capita density went up to over 50,000 persons. We are logistics, we are world busiest airport for international cargo and the 3rd busiest in terms of container port last year. Much of our development pressure and population needs have been met over the decades by going high-rise, vertical densities. This is done in order to enable that we could preserve our countryside. So these are all wonderful pictures taken in Hong Kong's country parks, including some of those included in the Waterworks Heritage Trail pamphlet that I'm going to pass on to you. Whenever I speak to overseas visitors and guests, I like to use this slide because this really tells people that at the same time that we are very congested and very dense and very high, we are also very, very green. This is a chart showing Hong Kong's land use. As you know, we are a very small place, just over 1,100 square kilometers, including all the outlying islands and so on. But in terms of built-up area, that accounts for only 24%. That is even less than 1/4 of Hong Kong's land has been developed. So you ask, where is the rest of Hong Kong's land resources? 46% are designated country parks, which of course are under statutory protection. We do not intend to develop into those areas. And at the same time, we have wetland, we have grassland, we have greenbelt zoned areas for preservation. How do we achieve this, this balance of going for a vertical high-density development at the same time preserving Hong Kong's green countryside? This is done through very careful spatial planning in terms of statutory controls imposed through what we call the outline zoning plans, prepared by an independent town planning board, which will decide on the land use of each and every of the district and areas. And of course, over the years, we try to meet Hong Kong's growing population needs through new towns. These are 3 or 4 generations of new towns that Hong Kong has developed over the years. This is also achieved by very efficient public transport system, which is very often the envy of overseas city planners and mayors coming to Hong Kong. They're all very impressed by our public transport system. So this 2 graphs shows you that in comparison, Hong Kong has very few roads built. Although we build roads almost every day, but still, in per capita length of public road built, we are very, very low. In terms of car ownership, it's the same picture. Despite we are a very affluent city, our car ownership is only 1/3 of Singapore because of our very efficient public transport system, which takes care of some 90% of daily trips made in Hong Kong. And we are still investing in this very efficient public transport system through the new domestic railway lines that we are building into the Western District, into the Southern District, and connecting Sha Tin all the way through another cross-harbour tunnel into Central. In his first policy address in this term of government, October 2007, this chief executive has pledged that we will continue to use infrastructure development to ensure Hong Kong's economic competitiveness. So he rightly said that infrastructure development will bring huge economic benefits in terms of employment opportunities and wage increases during the construction stage, and upon completion, more jobs generated by economic activities. And of course, some infrastructure goes towards improving Hong Kong's living environment. Just to amplify on the, following up on the CE's work, because I am now a politician, sort of, having resigned from the civil service and joined the governing team. So we have a duty to fulfill the CE's promises to the people of Hong Kong. So at the time when he made that statement in October 2007, if you look at this chart, Hong Kong's spending, government spending on capital works expenditure was at a record low. It's only about $20 billion. There's, as you can see, this bar diagram. From that point onwards, of course, through a lot of hard work by various bureaus and departments and our engineers and also our consultancies and so on, government capital work expenditure started to pick up, and pick up quite fast. With this year, for example, we have budgeted for $39 billion. But the latest revised forecast is we will exceed that figure, probably $44 to $45 billion. And looking ahead, of course, the pink figures are not yet real. They are included in our estimates for a medium-term forecast. But I'm quite confident to share with you now that Hong Kong will be seeing that high level of government capital works expenditure in the next few years because of all the major works that we have commenced or on which we have received funding for. So I'm going to cover three main areas of what I call new dimensions of infrastructure. The first is, of course, if you look at some of our major infrastructure, they all have a common theme, and that is enhancing Hong Kong's integration with the mainland. I'm sure overseas business communities will have this vision to look at Hong Kong not only as a Hong Kong of 7 million people, but also Hong Kong in the overall context of the Pearl River Delta. And this Pearl River Delta has a population of $52 million and a total GDP of over $560 billion US dollars. And this is where the business potentials and where the business prospects and growth are. We have a duty to ensure that we could effectively tap into the Pearl River Delta for our business associations and firms. And the best ways to look at this integration is to look at the crossing across the boundaries. At the moment, we have 6 land control points. I have not complicated this chart by bringing in the air passengers as well as those done by ferries. But just look at our land borders. We have 6 land control points, 4 by road and 2 by rail. And every day, 450,000 passenger trips are made. And this will make us the busiest control point in the world. And at the moment, we are still planning for additional control points to facilitate passengers going in and out of Hong Kong. Since I have other dimensions to cover, I'm not going to put a lot of efforts in explaining to you each and every of these major pieces of major infrastructure, which will have that dimension of enhancing integration with the mainland. These are all taken from the Chief Executive's 10 major infrastructure, which he announced in October 2007, and on which progress has been made in each and every one of those in the last 2.5 years. First is the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge. The construction will commence in the middle of this month. Second is the Guangzhou-Shenzhen-Hong Kong Express Rail Link that is just stationed in the West Kowloon Cultural District and all the way to Shenzhen and then to Guangzhou, for which funding for the entire works will be sought tomorrow at the Legislative Council Public Works Subcommittee. The third is the Hong Kong-Shenzhen Western Express Line, which studies and research have been done at a very advanced level. Originally, this was described as the link between the two airports, the Hong Kong International Airport and the Shenzhen International Airport. But the scope of the study has now been broadened to really enhancing integration and accessibility between Hong Kong and the western part of Shenzhen, with the latest plan of Shenzhen to develop a huge area called Qianhai, which was carried in today's newspapers. The fourth is to add a 7th control point to the border. This is also a land control point for vehicles and passengers. On the eastern part of Hong Kong, on Hong Kong's part is the Heng Yun Wai. On the Shenzhen part is the Lantang. So this is then will connect it up to the Shenzhen Eastern Expressway, which will take traffic all the way not only to eastern part of Guangdong, but also to Fujian. The fifth is a joint development of an area about 90 hectares in land, together with the Shenzhen government, what we call the Lok Ma Chau Loop. This is a piece of land formed by the two governments in the retraining of the Shenzhen River. So we feel that this is a very good area for us to pilot a co-development mode in order to meet the needs of both Hong Kong and Shenzhen. And the two sides, following an extensive consultation, has already agreed that this area should be positioned for meeting human resources development for the Pearl River Delta. So it's basically higher education, high technology, and creative industries. The sixth is really within Hong Kong, but is also developed with this closer integration with mine. These are called new development areas. They are our latest generation of new towns, but they will be smaller in scale, housing about 150,000 each instead of 500,000 each that we have seen in Sha Tin and Tuen Mun. And they're very close to Shenzhen. So in positioning these new development areas, both in terms of residential use as well as in industrial, which means non-polluting special industrial use, we are doing it very much with also this mainland angle in mind. This is a map to show you the positioning of all those major infrastructures that I have just covered very briefly, one by one. The second new dimension of infrastructure is really on things, on values that we now attach a lot of importance to: environment, conservation, leisure, greening, and urban regeneration. Because like any city, Hong Kong as a city is also aging, so we need to do something about regeneration. The first important project under this theme is Kai Tak development. This is also one of the 10 major that the chief executive has announced in 2007. I have not put Kai Tak development as one of those major population needs projects, but rather under this particular dimension, because the planning of Kai Tak has put a lot of emphasis and attention to green and conservation and public open space for the people to enjoy. We will transform this former Kai Tak airport and the runway into a green and leisure hub of over 320 hectares, but housing only 86,000 people. So you would imagine that there will be a lot of public open space, parks and leisure activities in this area to the scale of 97 hectares. So it's twice the size of the West Kowloon Cultural District that we are going to set aside for public open space. And this area through the runway will also accommodate Hong Kong's international cruise terminal, on which site formation works have started. And the cruise terminal building is now undergoing tender evaluation. We hope to be able to announce the winning entry in this design and build tendering in the first half of next year, with the first berth ready in 2013. I already mentioned this, the West Kowloon Cultural District, a 40-hectare site which has been designated for cultural development, housing in total 17 core arts and cultural facilities. Many arts people overseas are very jealous of us, because I don't think in many governments you could set aside this piece of precious land by the harbour front and an endowment of $21.6 billion, which has already been approved and given to the West Kowloon Cultural District Authority. So it does not have to worry about land, competitive land use. It does not have to worry about money in bringing to reality Hong Kong's major cultural hub, which, by the way, will also house the terminus of the express rail link that I have just mentioned in the major infrastructure. In terms of sustainable built environment, this is not something very glamorous, but this is something very, very important. We need to ensure that as we proceed on further development, we have taken into full account sustainability. So in order to do that, there is a host of initiatives that Development Bureau is spearheading, like reviewing our outline zoning plans to impose building height restrictions where justified, particularly by the harbourfront sites. We also try to lower development density, which means some revenue foregone. We need to conduct air ventilation assessments to guide our work. We are also preparing urban climatic maps to make sure that we have not done the wrong things in urban planning. Lately, we have launched Hong Kong's Green Building Council, which is, of course, the first time that we have a proper organization to press ahead with promoting green buildings in Hong Kong, to provide advocacy, to undertake assessment for Hong Kong's buildings through this BEAM. BEAM stands for stands for Building Environmental Assessment Method, like the US LEED or the Australia Green Stars. At the moment, we are trying to enhance BEAM to become BEAM Plus for assessing Hong Kong's buildings, whether they are green and sustainable. In a month or so's time, we also introduce a legislation into electrical to mandate the adoption of energy efficient codes in new buildings in Hong Kong. Next week, we are going to the Legislative Council to propose some institutional enhancements to ensure that we will do our job properly by setting up in Hong Kong a greening and landscape office and a tree management office. This is the first time that we have put landscaping into such a policy priority of the government. But at the same time, we are rolling out a lot of greening master plans throughout urban areas. I recently received an overseas delegation who came to Hong Kong once every 2 years or so, and they told me that they were quite impressed by the greening that they have seen in various parts of Central and Tsim Sha Tsui. And so if you have a bit of leisure time, just stroll around Hong Kong and you will see that many places are now full of green and flowering. And I have to admit that we don't have a lot of land to plant those trees, but we try to do our very, very best. We're also promoting rooftop greening and vertical greening in some of the projects that the URA, the Urban Renewal Authority, is undertaking. Cycling has always been not really well promoted in Hong Kong because of our topography, and also because people feel that after all this is for leisure. But we try to take a different perspective and manage to convince our colleagues in Transport Department that cycling could play a very useful role, particularly towards climate change and carbon emission. I know where our chairman comes from, Belgium is very, very good with promoting cycling. There's one day in a year that you don't allow cars on the street, right? Chris will know that everybody has to bicycle to work. So we are actually spending quite a lot of money to establish cycle tracks throughout the new territories. There are bits and pieces of cycle tracks in the NT. We are quite ambitious trying to connect those up. So in future, somebody will be able to bicycle all the way from Tsuen Wan to Tuen Mun, Shang Shui, Fanling, and then ended up in Sai Kung. How wonderful that idea is. Now I come to regenerating old urban areas. We have an institution called the Urban Renewal Authority, which is at arm's length from the government, independent with its own finances to undertake what they call the 4R strategy. That is redevelopment, that is to demolish and rebuild. Second is revitalization, like these historic buildings that you've seen here, which is a pawn shop, a 100-year-old pawn shop, now turned into an English restaurant as well as a Chinese restaurant in the heart of Wan Chai. We also do preservation on a district basis, and we also do rehabilitation of old buildings. Right now, URA is undertaking the biggest ever redevelopment project in Kwun Tong, which is a 5-hectare site in the heart of Kwun Tong, suffering from dilapidation over the years. But we are not complacent. We realize that perhaps it's time to relook the urban renewal strategy to set a new direction for Hong Kong, particularly with the rising public aspirations about preservation over the years. At the same time, we recognize that redevelopment could not be undertaken by the government or by the URA alone. So we are putting forward a legislative proposal in January next year to facilitate private sector-driven or market-driven redevelopment to lower the threshold for application for compulsory sale for redevelopment from 90% to 80%. In other words, if a majority owner could acquire 80% of ownership of a lot, then they could apply to the Lands Tribunal for compulsory sale in order to overcome the remaining hurdles for redevelopment. But not all buildings should be knocked down and replaced by high buildings. Buildings could be repaired. So at the same time, we have put a lot of attention to arresting building decay. If you walk around Hong Kong, particularly in the urban areas like Wan Chai and Sham Shui Po, you will see many of these pictures, buildings being wrapped up and then carrying a banner called Operation Building Bright. This is a Development Bureau initiative costing us $2 billion to repair 2,000 buildings within 2 years. This was introduced very much as a job creation initiative after the financial tsunami, but now playing a very important role to my program of arresting building decay. At the same time, on a more regular basis, other than this Operation Building Bright, we provide subsidies, about $40,000 each, to elderly owner-occupiers who own the property, but they just don't have the means to repair buildings or to respond to building orders for repairs. So we give them financial subsidies. But for those non-elderly, then we give them loans, low interest or sometimes new interest loans for them to repair their buildings. This is something very recent. This is revitalizing Hong Kong's surplus industrial premises. This chart shows you or compares the decline in Hong Kong's manufacturing sector as many of our industries moved northwards to Shenzhen and the Pearl River Delta. So we have seen our manufacturing sector declining from about a quarter of Hong Kong's GDP to less than 3%. But at the same time, the stock of industrial premises have not been reduced. We still have 17 million square meters of GFA in Hong Kong's industrial buildings. And 17 million square meters of GFA equivalent to 1.7 times of Hong Kong's total private office stock. So this is a huge asset that we have not fully optimized over the years because government does not own these buildings. These are in private hands. So this year, in order to give a push to the 6 new or competitive economic areas that the Chief Executive has announced, like creative industry, certification and testing, environmental services, education, and medical services, we have introduced this initiative to revitalize Hong Kong's surplus industrial buildings. This is a distribution by district of Hong Kong's industrial buildings. We have altogether 1,467 industrial buildings. The orange bars refer to those industrial buildings which are already sitting on land that is zoned non-industrial. In other words, from a planning and land use point of view, we already said that this piece of land should be non-industrial. But the building happens to be still a factory building. So how to facilitate and expedite this transformation process has been bothering us for a while as policymakers. So if you look at Kowloon, the entire Kowloon, whether it is in Kwun Tong, Mong Kok, Sham Shui Po, elsewhere, all the factory buildings that you see in Kowloon should be transformed in terms of land use, because over the years, the Town Planning Board has rezoned all of these into non-industrial use, mainly in what we call other use business. So they are supposed to be business land use. And in Kowloon alone, there are 660 such buildings. In Kwun Tong district alone, there are 364. So this is a major resource that Hong Kong has not fully made use of to support Hong Kong's economic development. And conversion of old buildings and factory buildings has been done in Hong Kong, but of course not on a very extensive scale. So this is something that we have done within the government. We have transformed the air cargo terminal building in Kowloon Bay into E&M's headquarters, the Electrical and Mechanical Services Department headquarters, which is under Development Bureau, with a lot of green features. So we actually use this building to do public education for schools, to look at these photovoltaic panels and all these solar things and so on. It has also been done in the private sector in Ap Lei Chau in the southern part of Hong Kong, where the industrial building owner has converted on a wholesale basis the industrial building into a shopping mall called the Horizon Plaza, with a lot of outlets and furniture shops. It has also been done more recently for creative industry, where we spent about $97 million from the Jockey Club to refurbish a former housing authority flat factory building in Shek Kip Mei, built in the 1950s, into Hong Kong's first creative arts center. So we don't have Beijing 798, or we don't have the Big Pack in Birmingham, but we do have this Jockey Club Creative Arts Center on a vertical basis as a sort of arts village, providing accommodation for 150 artists to do their productions through studios and also to receive visitors and so on. We also put in this refurbished building a black box theater for shows and other performing events to be carried out. So the policy push that we have given to revitalizing Hong Kong surplus buildings are only these 4. They are pretty straightforward. First is if a owner wants to go for redevelopment of an industrial building, we will facilitate the unification of ownership by applying what I just mentioned, the compulsory sale for redevelopment, lowering the threshold to 80%. And secondly, we will adopt a very innovative idea called pay for what you build. In other words, in the redevelopment, if you don't want to build very high buildings, you don't want to go to a per meter plot ratio of 15, you are happy to satisfy yourselves with a plot ratio of 8 to build a headquarters for a major company with a lot of open space and greening, that's fine. We will not charge premium on the basis of the maximum plot ratio, which has always been our policy, and is still our policy. But for industrial buildings, we are applying for the first time what we call pay for what you build. So tell us how much you want to build on that piece of land housing a former industrial building, and we'll charge land premium accordingly. And the third initiative is also a very innovative one, that is pay premium by installment. Never heard of in recent years in Hong Kong. So we allow owners who opt for redevelopment, who need a lease modification to change their use, to pay land premium by installment over a period of 5 years at a fixed interest rate. So at the time the lease is signed, the interest will be fixed for the whole 5-year period. This would be very attractive to medium-type developers, although big developers will have their way of financing, but medium developers and owners of former industrial buildings have told me that they find this initiative pretty helpful. But as I said, my personal inclination is to promote more conversions of some of the successful examples you have seen rather than demolition, because demolition creates a lot of waste, which we don't have landfills to take them. So we rather have more conversions, particularly when Hong Kong's industrial buildings are not very aged. Over 50% of Hong Kong's industrial buildings are younger, are less than 30 years of age. So they are very versatile buildings for conversion. So for conversion, this is a very big impact measure. We're not going to charge anything for change of use. So somebody who have paid land premium for industrial use 20 years ago now wants to turn the building into commercial use. And as you know, commercial use must be far more valuable in terms of rental than an industrial building. So normally under the hitherto policy, you have to pay the difference between commercial and industrial, between hotel and industrial. But we're saying that on this occasion, as a big push to speeding up the transformation, the government is not going to charge anything for the difference in value as a result of the transformation, provided the conversion is done on a wholesale basis. So you could not just convert one story, one flat, and so on, because that would create a lot of fire hazards arising from mixed use. We could not compromise public safety. So provided it's on wholesale basis, all the owners in the building come forward and change the lease from industrial to non-industrial, which then opens up the buildings to a lot of uses, shops and services, laboratories, medical centers, education institutes, and so on. And you don't have to pay anything for the lifetime of the building. So it's not just a time-limited concession. It's for the lifetime. It goes with the building, or goes with the lease. But Hong Kong's leases have been renewed mostly to 2047, so that's not a particular worry. Now, the third dimension, which is very close to my heart, is conserving historic buildings in Hong Kong, because I learned in this job as Secretary for Development that a city is defined not by its progress, not by its GDP alone. A city is also defined by its history. So in the last 2.5 years, Development Bureau, with the mandate from the Chief Executive in its 2007 policy address, have been rolling out one measure after another in conserving Hong Kong's historic buildings. First is I need to get the institution right. So we have set up a dedicated office called the Commissioner for Heritage Office. The commissioner is not a very high ranking, he's only at the level of about assistant director, but he has the clear mandate to discharge his role in preserving and protecting Hong Kong's industrial buildings, of course with my own support and steer. We have also set up dedicated teams in two important departments which will have a major role to play. One is the government's architectural services department, and second is in the buildings department in terms of how to relax some of the building codes in order to ensure historic buildings could be renovated and reused. We have also made all capital work projects subject to HIA, Heritage Impact Assessment. So in the past, if somebody wants to build a road, but it needs to knock down a historic building, they could not do it anymore. The MTRC, the Mass Transit Railway Corporation, have been asked to move the alignment of the West Island line just to save one historic building, the police station, and also to preserve some stone wall trees in Hong Kong. So that's quite a remarkable progress made. We also need money. So the Financial Secretary has kindly given me $1.5 billion. Not a lot, but good enough for me to kickstart some of the work that I have in mind to revitalize some government-owned buildings with NGO partners under a partnership scheme. We also need to encourage and facilitate private owners to preserve the buildings they own. So we also have an incentive scheme, economic incentive scheme, which I'll take you through a case later on, for both preservation and maintenance. So these are some of the projects that we have already contracted with the social enterprise, and I would highly recommend maybe in 2 years' time when you have this Hong Kong Forum, this is a place for your optional visits. The first is we are transforming a dilapidated and deserted police station on Lantau Island in Tai O, the fishing village, into a 4-star boutique hotel. The interesting thing is because we said that we're going to partner with NGOs on a non-profit making venture. So a developer has formed a non-profit making company in order to partner with us on a non-profit making venture. This is a very good example of corporate social responsibility. And the developer doing this project is the sort of a related developer that did Singapore's Fullerton Hotel. So I have every confidence that we'll do it well. The renovation works will start in a month's time. This is even more imminent. This is the North Kowloon Magistracy, a vacant courthouse in Sham Shui Po on Kowloon. We have partnered with American organization. The Savannah College of Art and Design will turn this magistracy building into the first Asia campus of SCED. It becomes SCED Hong Kong, offering degree and postgraduate courses to 1,500 students in 14 courses from digital media, IT program, computerization design, and things like that. And a heritage commencement ceremony for this project will take place next week with the president of SCED coming to Hong Kong. I mentioned about preserving owners in private hands. This is what we call the King Yin Lei. It's a private mansion built in 1930s on Stubbs Road. Whoever travels to the peak on bus route number 15 will pass through this wonderful building. It was sold from its original owner to a new owner 2 years ago in September 2007. The new owner went in to try to knock down the building. At the time, the building was not yet a monument, so it was not put under statutory control. I went in to declare it a proposed monument, so I put it under freeze for 12 months to decide what to do with it. And ultimately, we have reached a deal with the new owner to do a land swap. So the green bounded site is the historic building site. The yellow bounded site is a new site that we are going to change, to swap with the new owner. But that site is actually a man-made slope. It is not a site that we would sell normally for revenue. It's just a man-made slope. So we managed to strike that deal, and the deal was completed on the 18th of November, with the new owner paying land premium. Because we argue that the yellow site is more valuable than the green site. I don't know how my land valuers did that, but they did that. They did that, and the new owner has paid us an additional land premium and handed the old building and the site to us and paid for all the renovation costs to the old building because they have defaced the building somewhat. And so if you pass through that building, it's under extensive renovation overseen by a Guangzhou University professor. Again, I will welcome you to go into this private mansion next time you come here, because by the time, in a year's time, we should have completed the restoration and then decide on what to use with this building. Somebody has talked about various ideas, and we are still deliberating on that. Now, finally, is conserving Central. I hope that this is really the results of hard work and a change of mindset by the government over the years that have culminated in Conserving Central, which is a package of 8 exciting projects, all within Central, with the theme of preservation. This is a map showing you the 8 innovative projects starting from the new Central Harbour Front. Although some people will say that the harbour front is not historic, it's a new reclamation. But if you ask me, the greatest heritage in Hong Kong is our Victoria Harbour, as natural heritage of Hong Kong. So we have started from the harbour front and all the way into the central government offices and so on. And I believe you will take in some of these sites in your optional visit, the architectural walk that the TTC has kindly laid out for you. So what actually will happen in Conserving Central? The new Central Harbour Front, about 2.3 hectare land, will be turned into a civic square instead of being sold off for more buildings of super grade A offices. And there will be a 1.7 hectare piazza linking up IFC2 with the ferry piers, where people will enjoy the harbour front with nice restaurants and also a little bit of gallery spaces and festival activities. The Central Police Station, which is a cluster of 16 monuments in Hong Kong, will be turned into an entertainment and creative hub in partnership with the Hong Kong Jockey Club, which they are going to invest $1.8 billion. We have invited Herzog and de Meuron, the design architect for the National Stadium for the Olympics, to be the design architects for the Central Police Station. And the Central Market, which is at the moment a very dilapidated market that has been vacant in the last 5 years, will be transformed into Central's oasis, a place for some affordable dining, eating, bookstores for people working in Central. The Police Merit Quarters at Hollywood Road, which was the Chief Executive's residence when he was a child, will become Hong Kong's creative hub. As you know, there are already a lot of studios and arts and designers working along Hollywood Road. So this will be the gathering place for all the artists, both local and overseas, with a bit of artist residence on the top floors. The central government offices where we are still working will be vacated in less than 2 months' time, 2 years' time, when we completed the Tamar Central Government Complex. So we have invited a UK conservation architect to come in and look at the significance of the site. And the conclusion is this site is significant, not because of the 3 buildings. These buildings are okay, but they are not very, very distinguished. They just reflect the streamlined, this simplistic architecture at the time, because they're all built after 1950. But this site is very significant in historic terms because it has always been the site of government in Hong Kong for the last 150 years. And it is also very significant because of its juxtaposition with the government house and with the whole compound, with the St. John's Cathedral and so on. So this chief executive has agreed that we will preserve both the main wing and the east wing, which is this T-shaped building, and have it fully renovated to become the Department of Justice headquarters. I think this is very good because Hong Kong's advantage lies also in the rule of law. To give our DOJ, headed by the Secretary for Justice, its distinguished building is only proper. But the West Wing will be demolished and redeveloped into commercial offices because the West Wing is actually more on Ice House Street, forming part of the central business district rather than part of this GH, the government house. The only project within this Conserving Central, which is not a government project, is the Hong Kong Shing Kung Hui compound, which is also on Lower Albert Road. Not many people realize that within this compound, we have 4 distinguished historic buildings, the Archbishop's residence, all dating back 100 and 120 years ago, because it's a closed door thing that you cannot go in without permission. But the church has really supported this whole concept of conservation. So they are going to refurbish and preserve all the 4 historic buildings and turn this into a sort of public access ground with some church museum, with some wonderful facilities, a coffee shop and so on. This is a project that will be undertaken by the church itself without any subsidy from us. But of course, we facilitated by allowing the church to transfer some of its plot ratio to another site so that the church needs could be met, the buildings could be preserved. It's a win-win situation. So next time you come into Hong Kong, it's not just Lan Kwai Fong and Soho. You could also go into the compound to attend a mass or to have some carol singing during Christmas time. The seventh is not very much a historic building, but the Marriott building carries a lot of significance in terms of its location and its architecture. It was built in the 1960s, an award-winning building for the government because of its environmentalism. The very shape of the windows and the access road have all embodied this concept of sustainability. So we said that we are not going to knock down the Marriott building for sale when the offices move to Tamar. We will preserve a building but sell off the site for a wholesale conversion into a distinguished hotel. Many cities worldwide have offices turned hotels, and we hope to do this right, especially in Central. The private developers have knocked down hotels one after another, from Hilton to Ritz-Carlton to Furama and so on. So we need a wonderful hotel right next to the tram station and overseeing the Hong Kong Park. A lot of developers have already indicated interest. They want to bid for this site to turn it into a hotel. Now the final is one which has a question mark. This is of course the current Court of Final Appeal building, a very beautiful building sitting in the compound. In several years' time it will be vacant because the Court of Final Appeal will move to the Legislative Council building when the Legislative Council building moves on to Tamar. So we expect that the building will be available for adaptive reuse in 2015. Many people have already eyed this hotel, this building, including, as I said, the French community. And that's why they invite me to go to their French business community function tomorrow, perhaps to impress upon me how important that we should return this building to the French community, because it was the former French missionary building, which somehow they sold it to us in 1951. So I was telling them, perhaps you need to pay us back if you want to get back the building. But on a serious note, what the CEE has said is because this is years down the road, it will not be available until 6-7 years later. So let's take a pause here. Do not decide yet, and then look around and see what interesting and exciting projects we have before we decide on the future adaptive reuse of the Court of Final Appeal building. I'm sure that will be a very exciting process. I just end with this note. All that we have been doing, the new dimensions of infrastructure development, actually also is a response to the Chief Executive's philosophy of progressive development, which he announced in his first policy address in this term of government. He said that we will insist that our development be sustainable, balanced, and diversified. While the economy powers ahead, we must take care of environmental protection and cultural conservation to offer our people a quality city life. And he will insist that development bring about social harmony with different strata of people sharing the fruits. And I hope that with this brief presentation, I have impressed upon you that we are doing the job as the Chief Executive has envisaged, and we will hopefully make Hong Kong a much better place for business and for living. Thank you very much.